The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Bronx Roots with David Hubler, Michael Preminger, and the intruder, me, Ralph Tyko from Queens, but my grandparents were for the Bronx. How you doing, David? Michael's not here this week.
Yeah, I know. He has a good excuse.
It's bittersweet because I'm so happy for him. He's watching his grandson play t-ball.
Right. Yeah, and of course it's his first grandchild, so that's important. First grandson, I should say. And
that he's 31.
Yeah.
The kid is 31. That shouldn't make a difference.
Right. Yeah. He's a little big for t-ball, but
that's all right. He's having fun, and
he crouches like Stan Musial, you know.
What they say, he had the stance where he looked like he was peering at you from around the corner.
Something like that, yeah. But Michael will be back next week, he told us, so we'll be good.
Yeah, that'll be good. This has been a real rough week for the country. And I had a specific question because all of us on Facebook, all of us at the network, all of us, our friends, our relatives, we can't all possibly have the same point of view of what's going on. But we end up meeting folks with absolutely polar, what's the word?
The polar opposite, absolutely.
A polar opposite of our views. And you and I have made it, and most folks that I know have made our views very similar. We're pretty much liberal, progressive folks. And with that in mind, I know an awful lot of folks who still cling to what I call ridiculous arguments that don't address the point. How do you deal with people? How does one, and this is more rhetorical than anything else, how does one deal with people who just keep backing up their same mistakes? We voted for the guy, so we have to support him for the rest of our lives. We can't admit that we might have been wrong, that he might have deceived us, this, that, and the other thing. How does one remain civil in a case like that? And that I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do, of course. And it's interesting. I mean, whether you like Trump or not, the people who really support him in many cases would not have supported him had he retained his party membership in the Democratic Party. Which I don't think he was actually a member, but he certainly claimed to be a Democrat at one point. And because he came from New York, automatically that eliminates a large portion of the country who these people who are concerned about the New York elite. You heard the term elite came up many times during the conventions and during the before the voting, and I always wondered, who is this elite that they keep talking about? I don't know anybody I would consider being an elitist.
I think by elite they mean elite bank accounts, perhaps.
Well, maybe, but certainly if they're talking about elite bank accounts, well, the president qualifies as being an elite. Yet his support does not come mostly from elite. Comes from the folks in the South and Midwest and religious people. So you wonder what this term elite actually means, because you remember years ago when the parties, both parties, would select their presidential tickets, they tried to balance the ticket. So if they had a New Yorker, like, say, a Roosevelt, on the ticket, the vice president would come from the South, let's say. And he went through four vice presidents. Kennedy and Johnson, exactly. New England Brahmins, the Kennedys, and Lyndon Johnson, grassroots Democrat, from Texas, the wild open plains of Texas.
Right.
And they did that intentionally. Nixon, the Californian, picked Maryland governor, former Maryland governor, to be his running mate. Unfortunately, he picked the wrong person, but it was a geographic balance. So they used to do things like that. I recently saw that. I think I mentioned on one of our shows when we talked about the film. It was with Henry Fonda, who was a candidate for the presidency, and he was trying to get the nomination at the convention. I'm trying to something like The Perfect Candidate. Anyway, the film.
It was, as a matter of fact, The Perfect Candidate. Yes.
Something like that. And I don't think that is the title, but that was the premise of the movie. And Henry Fonda plays this good guy who's surrounded by these real politicians, And the interesting thing about the film is that it was filmed in like 1962 or somewhere around that era. It was a little later because they actually mention you see a mention of Lyndon Johnson in it, but I thought it was about 64, I'd say. In any case, the actual premise of the movie was as real in 64 as it is today. I mean, it was looking for the good candidate as opposed to the politician, the guy that'll scrape and scrimp and do anything to claw his way to the top. And there were some lines in that film that were very prescient that would apply easily today. And you say, "Wow!" You sit up in your chair when you see this, and then of course you have the scene of the other candidate. I forget who played that part. Coming in to the garage area of the old Ambassador Hotel. And anyone who remembers the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles knows that that's where Robert Kennedy was shot and killed. So there's that element in the film. But that was a different era. That's what the point I was trying to get to, was that it was a different era. My parents, getting back to the Bronx roots, my parents were the only Republicans in the neighborhood, as far as I can tell. Others, there might have been a few others.
My father was a Republican living on Social Security and cursing
Roosevelt,
Hoover, and cursing FDR. We never could understand it.
Yeah.
It makes, and that brings us back to what we were talking about. How do you deal with people you love, that you care about, that they reveal things in their politics that you don't want to have revealed? You almost wish you never would have brought it up.
Well, I have a good example. I have an elderly aunt. She's 92 or 93. And we all love her to death, and she spends her days watching Fox News. Now, this is a woman who is educated. She graduated from George Washington University in a scientific degree. Went to work at the Pentagon for years. Her husband worked for NSA for many years. They went abroad for the NSA for about a year or two. And yet, and of course, her husband, my uncle, served in World War II, was from the Bronx, went to the same high school I did, and yet, there she is, an avid a follower of Trump and everything Fox News says, and the rest of us in the family can't understand where this came from. We laugh at it. I mean, that's how we get along. We laugh at this dichotomy of her being on one side and everybody else in the family being on the other side.
You know, you hit on something. You have to. Humor has to come into it.
Absolutely. I have friends here. We have close friends here. We see them regularly, and we laugh, and they too, as can't understand how in the world. Well, in her case, I can't understand. She grew up in Brooklyn. If you grow up in Brooklyn in an Italian neighborhood, it's the mirror image of growing up in the Bronx in a Jewish neighborhood. You know, I mean, the mores, the attitudes, the familia kind of emphasis. It's all the same. It's just a different language and a different cuisine. But so she, one would have thought that she would have leaned more towards a liberal side, but she's a big supporter of Trump, and so is her husband, who comes from a military family background, and so it's more understandable. But when we get together, we don't talk politics usually. If we do, it's sort of in a comedic sense of the word. And then the other thing is we agree that it doesn't matter how we vote because we each cancel each other's out, and the four of us live in Virginia. So if they get to vote first, we cancel them out, and if we vote first, they cancel our votes out. And we sort of laugh about this because it happens every 4 years.
You know, my mother, coming from my grandfather's family, was a Republican when she got married to my father, a Democrat. But in those days, in the 50s, you could almost flip a coin. What's the difference?
Yes.
So when the arguments weren't arguments, they were discussions. And we talk about being polarized. Nowhere near like we are today.
No, correct, true.
So we go back to the senators from New York. Keating, I think was one of them.
Yes, and Javits.
He was a middle-of-the-road Republican. So what's the difference between a middle-of-the-road Democrat in those days and a middle-of-the-road Republican?
True. And, you know, it's funny you should bring that up because while we were in New York last week, we went, actually, we wanted to go onto the High Line, you know, that wonderful walkway that they built on the west side. And you walk past the Jacob. I was in New York a couple of years ago. Go ahead. Yeah, you walk past the Jacob K. Javits Center, which is this huge conference center on the west side. It was interesting, the statue of Javits in the building. Now, Javits was a Republican, and he was beloved by just about everybody in the state. And, in fact, it was interesting, the statue just inside the main hall there was draped in a yarmulke and a tallis because it was Rosh Hashanah. And somebody draped him in that, and the statue in that. And I was thinking, you know, it could have been a Democrat, could have been a Republican. Javits was, as I said, was beloved by just about everybody, you know, in the state. And as you say, the differences in those days was just minimal.
Even Rockefeller, I mean, Rockefeller was a magnanimous guy. The family were.
Oh yeah.
He gave that. He showed socialistic characteristics. Now you use the word socialism today, and it's just horrible.
Well, yeah, they've politicized that. Well, they politicized a political term. But you're right about Rockefeller. In fact, his brother was a Democratic governor of West Virginia for a good number of years.
Right.
And then he was a senator for many more years as on the Democratic side. So right there in the middle of the Rockefeller family. Now, if any wealthy family, you know, should have a reason to be Republicans, the Rockefellers certainly should be.
And to be honest with you, the Kennedys had more Republican attributes, the way I look at it, than the Rockefellers on some level.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. Certainly, Papa Joe did not get along with
beings.
Yeah, did not get along with Roosevelt very well, and Roosevelt just cut him out during the war. Of course, he was ambassador to Britain, and I've not been able to determine how that really came about. But I know that some of the diplomatic posts, like Britain, France, where there's so much entertaining to be done, and their close allies, that very often the people who become the ambassador to those countries are very wealthy individuals who can afford to spend money out of their own pocket to maintain the social activity to which everybody else in the diplomatic community is entitled.
But they also have the money to support the candidate that appoints them.
Exactly, that's very true too. Sure. When we were at the embassy in London, it was David Bruce was the ambassador, and he was succeeded by what's his name? Out your way, in Los Angeles, the big journalism school at USC. I think it's at USC.
I'm up north a little bit.
I know, but it's all the same state. I just put
it together.
He owned TV Guide for many years and made a fortune with the daily race sheet, and he was appointed ambassador to Britain. With a W.
The journalist.
Yeah. What was it?
Whose granddaughter got kidnapped? The Hearsts.
No, it wasn't Hearst. No. I can't think of his name. They named the journalism school after him. I believe it's at USC or UCLA, I forget. And he has a big endowment to foster journalism and things like that. Anyway, he became the ambassador.
The key word is he had a big endowment.
Yes, and he became the ambassador to Great Britain. Now, the reason I mention it is because not only did he have the money to support Nixon, which he did, and also the money to spend from his own pocket on social activities at the embassy and elsewhere, because the embassies don't get large social budgets. They don't have that much money. But what he also did was he actually redecorated the ambassador's residence in London, which had been a bit run down, and he did it in fine elitist style. He wound up importing wall coverings of satin or another material from some castle or whatever it was in China. It wouldn't have been a castle, but they carefully took it off the walls there, and they brought it over to London and put it up on Annenberg, Walter Annenberg. That's who.
Yes.
The Annenberg School of Journalism, right? Walter Annenberg. So, and he made a fortune with TV Guide, and whatever the daily racing tip sheet is. But those were his publications. But his wife had any number of receptions. A couple of them my wife went to, and it was a magnificent place. Even the British, who really looked down on him as ambassador, when an ambassador presents his credentials to the sovereign or the president of the country, whoever's the head of state, they do so in a very formal way. They hold their credentials in their hands open, and they walk in, and they're tutored on how to walk to the Queen and nod. You don't really bow to another sovereign in the state. Just sort of nod.
Did you smile did you cringe when Trump walked with the Queen of England?
He walked away. He walked in front of her, yes.
He kind of pushed her out of the way.
Yeah, I know. He did. But so Annenberg made this presentation to the Queen, and he was so tongue-tied, even though he'd had a script prepared, that it came out a little bit of gibberish, saying something to the effect that the embassy residence is in need of elements of refurbiture, which the Brits thought was extremely funny. So they were down on the Annenbergs until he opened that embassy residence, which he had redecorated, and they all agreed it was just spectacular. So that's how he got them on their side. But the point was that that's where the elitists come from. Those the British, French, Australian embassy, all the big ally embassy. I guess Germany would be considered in that group too. So it takes a lot of money to become ambassador, and of course they're the ones who have the money to do so. I think even when Shirley Temple was ambassador to Czechoslovakia, she spent a lot of her own money on these types of things. So, but getting back to what the point was that those days, in the late 60s, 70s, there was more amity among the president's side and the opposition side. Everybody remembers, well, not everybody, but a lot of people remember how Ronald Reagan got along with Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill. The two of them, because they were both of Irish descent, they had something in common, and they both enjoyed a drink every couple of whenever, and they got on fine, despite the fact that they were on opposite sides of the aisle. Doesn't happen today.
That's why it was refreshing when Flake went.
Yes, and I'll tell you something about Flake. I remember when Flake was in the House of Representatives, and I thought that's just exactly what he was, a flake. He made outlandish remarks, absurd statements, and I thought the guy was really, in that camp, in the real right-wing camp. Yet when he went into the Senate, he became a voice of moderation. He's still a Republican, but as you can see from what happened the other day, I mean, he's not, he's not adamant about it, as somebody put it. He's willing to see compromise. Unfortunately, he's not running for re-election, and the reason is he knows he won't win. Because
it's Arizona for crying out loud.
Yes, exactly. I always attribute that in Florida to the sun. I always think that these people have been out in the sun too long. It beats on their head. You're coming out of a day in the sun, and you're kind of goofy and dizzy. And I think that's
I attribute the crazy thinking in the Midwest to the Father and the Holy Ghost. So.
Well, they're all over the place.
Different sun. You meant a different sun.
Yeah, I meant a different sun, right? The S-U-N sun.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
We could both be right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I believe too, and I gathered, I got a hint of this when we went out west 2 summers ago and went to Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. They're considered the flyover states. They don't. Right. They're so detached from Washington politics. There's such a vast openness about those areas that they don't want any encroachment, physical or otherwise. And I can understand that to a greater extent. I mean, you grow up in New York. We were in New York, as I said, we were in New York last week or so, and it's crowded, yet people get along. For the most part, they do. They ride the subways together, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. They don't seem to be street fights over politics, even though they probably all the disagreements. Maybe, in fact, there was an article in the Post today about these two neighbors in Nebraska, and they're close friends, and one is a avid Trump supporter, and the other is a Democrat. And it's interesting, to me at least, is that the woman who grew up in the wild open spaces of Nebraska, has never really traveled outside Nebraska for the most part. And she is the Trump supporter. The woman who lives just across the way, her close friend, worked in the federal government in Washington for several years. She is not a Trump supporter. And I think location has a great deal to do with it. Even in our home state of New York, you could see that. I never realized how big the state was till we took that train up to Canada last week. I mean, that's a big state. I don't know if it's as big as Florida geographically, but it certainly is bigger than anything else on the East Coast. And there are areas up there with people there too, just are devoid of any real connection to Washington. And they think what's going on is fine. The closer you are to Washington, I think you come across. That's why Northern Virginia, which at one point was deep red state, is now purple and deep blue here in Northern Virginia because of the advent of so many new government programs that require people to be here. And these people are close to government, and they have a knowledge and an understanding of how government works or doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. At least they can discuss it, and at least they.
Oh yeah, and they do for the most part. It's a friendly discussion. I don't know if somebody.
Okay, now let me ask you, because the thing I have the most trouble understanding is how the evangelistic Christians can still be supporting Trump and his ilk at this point in our world.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, my feeling is that the number one goal, and the goal of many on the right, is to do away with Roe v. Wade, and that's their main goal. And
they'll accept anything.
They'll accept anything to get to that goal. Yeah. That's their compromise, you talk about politics being the art of compromise. That's their compromise. They're willing to have an adulterer, I shouldn't say an adulterer, I should say accused adulterer.
The poster boy for it.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw, anyone who saw that tape from Billy Bush.
And talking in the locker
room.
I
mean, no, not in the locker. They were coming off the bus. It was locker room talk, they called it.
Locker room talk, that's what I meant.
Yeah. I mean, he admitted to and enjoying it. There was no doubt about what he said.
I grope, therefore I am.
Yeah, because I'm a celebrity. I can do it and get away with it. And now he's become the voice of moderation in the Kavanaugh dispute. Well, we have to get to the bottom of this. Right. Yeah, we
already got to the bottom of it. The accusations notwithstanding, I think the hearings brought out the fact that the man simply doesn't have the temperament for it.
Yes.
The way he reacted to the senator whose dad was a recovering alcoholic, year-old man, and this is a woman who is he's applying for the job, for Christ's sake. And she asked him, rightfully, given your calendar, given all that's been said, do you drink in excess? He says to the senator, do you?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was awful. I think if the Republicans on the committee were really, really intent on putting someone in there who would be fair, even if he was to the right, but to be fair in his adjudication, they would withhold this nomination. I really believe that. Because you're right. I think that's the one area that he exposed himself to the most damage. What he did as a 17-year-old kid, let's face it, lots of 17-year-old kids did lots of crazy things. Trying
and
to make it
go. Exactly that. I was too drunk to even know what I was doing.
Yes,
I was 17, and that was wrong. I may have hurt this woman horribly.
Yeah.
I feel bad for her. For just acknowledge it in that way.
Yes.
It would have been, you could buy,
yes, you
buy
could.
the argument.
I know, and you're right. You're so right when you say that he may have disqualified himself because of his temperament. Yes, a lot of people saw a real raw side of the man, which supposedly only came out when he was drunk, according to his friends from that era. So it's just what I find the most disturbing to me, aside from how this thing is being, is the hypocrisy from the Republican members on that committee to suggest that it's the greatest sin that in the history of the Senate. And I mean, all you have to do is say
the greatest sin.
I mean, the greatest travesty.
The greatest speech, the greatest rescue effort in the history of America. Greatest.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
Hyperbole is just incredible. Like
it is.
Get the Emancipation Proclamation, that was pretty good.
The two words, the real, you talk about hypocrisy of them, blaming the Democrats for creating this stir and this false narrative. Look what they did to Merrick Garland. They wouldn't even let him get to a Senate hearing. Mm-hmm. The man was nominated by Obama. He had a year to go in his second term, and according to the Speaker, Senate leader, that was not enough time to qualify for a nomination, and so he stonewalled it for a year. Now you talk about really destroying the constitutional provision of what I'm thinking of when you recommend and you confirm the nominee.
The procedure.
I can't think of the term right at the moment, but that in itself was a disgrace. That was a national disgrace that he pulled off without any dissent from any of his Republican colleagues that was the travesty. Now, there he is claiming that it's the Democrats trying to get even because of the Clintons, what the Clintons did. The Clintons.
Him saying that is another thing that should disqualify.
Yeah, of course.
Because the Supreme Court is not supposed to be a.
That's right. Exactly. When Eisenhower appointed the Chief Justice, and now I'm really dating myself, and he turned out to be not the conservative that Eisenhower expected. Eisenhower admitted that was
John Foster Dulles, I think was his name.
No. John Foster Dulles was Secretary of State. He nominated what was his name? Supreme Court. He was the Chief Justice. Chief Justice. And Eisenhower admitted later that was his biggest mistake because he didn't know what the man's true politics were, and he turned out to be a very, I'd say, moderate. He wasn't a real, but he was moderate in the sense that he took each case as it came and adjudicated it fairly, which was not the way, and not that Eisenhower was really a right winger. He wasn't. I mean, the Democrats had tried to get him to be their nominee too for the presidency. So, but here was a man who,
That's interesting.
Yeah, here was a man who became who became Chief Justice, and without the knowledge, the widespread knowledge that he was to the right, to the left, although Eisenhower believed he would be, moderately conservative. Let's put it that way.
Other judges have changed. There's that theory that they all go towards the middle, one way or the other.
Yeah, well, Yeah, well, I mean, look, Roberts.
I've been watching the documentary on Ginsburg on CNN.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
She is a pip,
isn't she? Yes. God, I hope she lives to be 120.
Oh, she better outlive Trump. That's
well, as somebody said, he's replacing. What's his name? The retired. How quickly we forget, but I've been forgetting names for a long time.
Vito or whatever his name is.
No. He's
Kennedy.
Yeah, Kennedy. So and Kennedy was to the right, but but he was not totally to the right. He was but he was the swing vote. In a lot of these 5-4 decisions, which is what will happen now. At the same time, the real Supreme Court followers, the law professors, they say, well, it's not going to be that much different. The 5-4 decisions will still come about, but they might be more prevalent than they were when Justice Kennedy retired. Because occasionally Kennedy, and even Chief Justice, he went along with the Obamacare. That was a deciding factor. Roberts voted for or whatever or against whatever bill was going to kill Obamacare, and he voted against it, and that was a swing vote in that situation. So, and then of course Roberts went along, and so did, by the way, Kennedy on the vote for Citizens United, which I think is terrible. I mean, giving corporations the same equality as individual voters. That's what brought on these super PACs and all these other institutions of political leanings. So the Chinese have a curse. May you live in interesting times, and we certainly are cursed.
I don't know if it's a curse, but it turns out to be a curse. I'd like it to be a little more calm this week.
Yes, amen to that.
Emotionally, we've gone from, first of all, Flake at the beginning of Friday's session said that he was going to vote with no problems. He was going to vote for Kavanaugh, and I thought we're dead.
Yeah.
Absolutely dead in the water. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, what a loss. He's going to go in. He's going to say that presidents shouldn't be subject to investigation while they're in office.
Right.
My God, that would clear Trump en total.
Yeah.
And then it was the woman that caught him in the elevator that turned the tide.
Yes. Well, but had he been a dyed-in-the-wool real right-winger, it wouldn't have made a difference. He has been an outspoken. He's been outspoken on a lot of issues recently. Flake has, where he's actually held a moderate position. Why can't we all get along, kind of a thing, as opposed to being an out-and-out in that real right-wing group of Republicans. So, I mean, it may have helped sway.
Graham would have shut the elevator door on her face.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And Grassley too. I mean, Grassley is 80-something years old. I mean, I don't blame him for getting old.
Doesn't look a day over 79.
Yeah, right. But you look at the demeanor of Grassley, of what's his name?
Orrin Hatch. Give me a break with that jerk.
Well, he was the lonely, really right winger for years until he wound up with all these buddies now. So,
let me tell you, Orrin Hatch. They quoted him. They said, "What did you think of Dr. Ford's testimony?" He says, she was very attractive.
Yeah, which was really, boy, was that a dumb thing to say, huh?
Unbelievable. It wasn't anything that he wouldn't have said.
Right.
He had time to think about it.
Yeah. But boy,
Gives you an idea.
it just goes to show that these people don't get it. They don't get this Me Too movement. They don't get, how to treat a woman, how to be respectful. I mean, I thought that was just a ridiculous statement to make. And I'm sure some of his aides and fellow Republicans off the microphone, said, hey, you really shouldn't have said that.
Well, interesting times. You're
Yes,
absolutely
yes,
correct.
right. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you, David. This has been a wonderful discussion. You helped put things in order for me, and I'm just confused by it all.
Well, you're not the only one, believe me. We're all confused on this thing. We just want to see it over.
We'll be back next week. Michael will be with us with, again, he had the fun of watching his kid play T-ball. How bad is
Yes, and he'll come in with his World Series predictions.
Not his son.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
See you next week, my friend.
Take care. Be good.
Take care of yourself, and thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back before you know it. Adios. This has been a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.